Before the video begins, I'd like to address a personal matter. Please join my Discord, where I regularly share smaller updates throughout the day about my new videos. Thank you, and now enjoy the video. This video falls under the fair use law. The following is a fan summary, for entertainment purpose, only, which is not intended to replace the original series. We do not own the anime, manhwa, or any of the artworks, all rights reserved to their respective owners. Please support the official release of this series. This is for people's enjoyment only. This video is not meant to infringe any of the copyrights. While the priests were bound within the magical green circle of El, he raised his hand forward and conjured his powerful spell, Black Mist. Instantly, the enchanted spell flew towards the group of priests, who were unaware of what was happening. They were immediately enveloped in a dark cloud of mist and could see nothing. The leader of the priests turned to his followers and asked what kind of mist it was. His disciples also looked down, confused, and asked you as well about the nature of this magic, as they had never seen anything like it before. The leader of the priests believed it to be a trap set by the Tower Master. He angrily questioned why his subordinates had not taken action against this black mist and ordered them to use their anti-magic abilities immediately. One of the disciples accepted the command and stated that they should not forget their mission. Subsequently, all the priests raised their hands to the sky and cast their enchanting light, creating an aura of light that gradually fought and dispelled the black mist of El. El was pleased that the priests had the idea to combat his darkness with light, but wanted to engage in a more serious battle and demonstrate the true power of his dark mist to the priests. El raised his hand to the sky again and conjured his black mist once more, this time in a much stronger version. The light created by the priests to combat the black mist instantly extinguished, and a large black pillar of darkness rose instead. As a result, the priests were once again drawn into the darkness. Some of the priests pulled into the black mist by El were seasoned magicians who had mastered magic but could do nothing against the magic that blocked their senses. El reached into his pocket, pulled out a small pair of glasses, put them on, and smilingly stepped into the darkness as well. The black mist caused the holy knights to lose all their senses and become instantly confused. The priests recognized their situation and the fact that they could not rely on their senses but were reluctant to simply retreat. One of the stronger priests turned to his comrades and told them not to fear panic, as they were in an illusion. He also ordered them to pull themselves together and activate the blessing of light once again. The priests tried once more to raise their hands and cast the spell. Initially, it seemed as if the spell would take effect again, dispelling the darkness just like the first time. However, this time, the priests visibly struggled to maintain their spell. One of the priests asked their leader why he wouldn't support them and why their holiness wouldn't also apply the blessing. They increasingly had difficulty sustaining the spell and were thus struggling in the battle. Eventually, they had to concede, lacking the strength to cast the spell. One by one, the priests faced this difficulty. Desperately waiting for their leader, the archpriest Bolek, to come to their aid. Meanwhile, on the other side of the magical tower, El's soldiers, whom he had met while saving the village, were already waiting for their deployment. They impatiently looked towards the city, anticipating El's return. Captain Miter told his comrades that El would return any moment now, bringing an end to their wait. Immediately afterward, a voice announced that she was back. The soldiers turned their gaze to El, who was carrying one of the priests on his shoulders. It was the leader, Bolek. El tossed the unconscious Bolek to the ground. Miter asked his master if he was the one after his sister, the holy mistress, and then if they should take care of him. El looked down sadly and told his soldiers to observe everything for the time being. The entire group of soldiers then knelt down, assuring their master that they understood this instruction. Furthermore, they pledged obedience to El's will, regardless of what might come. This surprised El immediately, as he hadn't expected such a reaction. Seeing the disbelief on his face, one of the soldiers explained that he had heard correctly and that they would swear eternal loyalty to him. However, this soldier also asked El something that puzzled him. He looked at El and asked if they could then win, as he had in mind that they would rise against the Holy Kingdom if they continued to try to hide and protect the Holy One from them. However, El just smiled and said that they could certainly win this battle, as he has no intention of losing, and losing is something he wouldn't know. He then raised his right hand, moved it a few times in the air, and magically made a few glasses and a pair of handcuffs rain from nowhere in front of the soldiers on the ground. He handed the items to his soldiers and explained that these were artifacts that, when worn, could neutralize the effect of his black mist. Additionally, he explained that the handcuffs could seal the power of holy magic. When Captain Miter received the bag of artifacts and the explanation, he was completely surprised. El instructed him to use these items to capture the remaining knights of the Holy Kingdom still within his black mist. El further explained that once these handcuffs were applied, the warriors would have only the strength of an ordinary man. Equipped with El's artifacts, the soldiers set off and prepared to carry out the mission. Everyone was highly motivated and entered the midst of the black mist. In the midst of the fog, the soldiers could see the silhouettes of the enemy knights. They were completely exhausted on the ground and had no idea where they were. It came as a bolt from the blue to the enemy soldiers when they were suddenly apprehended by the soldiers on El's side. They cursed but still couldn't do anything as they were in the midst of the mist. Even when a desperate enemy soldier mustered all his remaining strength and tried to launch an attack by blindly rushing forward, he was immediately stopped and dispatched by Captain Miter. He went down, visibly angry, biting his teeth and cursing. He could barely keep his eyes open and saw Captain Miter placing the handcuffs on his hands. He knew he couldn't give up here but had no strength left to keep his eyes open. When Captain Miter and his soldiers finished capturing all the men from the Holy Kingdom, he handed them over to El. El explained to Captain Miter that he was just glad that everything had proceeded without further complications. Additionally, El instructed Captain Miter that he should treat the captured knights as carefully and gently as possible, ensuring that they did not get injured. El was aware that the real war was about to begin, and he knew that the Holy Kingdom would not remain idle if their soldiers were captured. 2 weeks had passed since then, and by now, the Holy Kingdom had learned that their soldiers had been captured. As a consequence, there was a meeting to discuss the next steps. The high authorities of the kingdom sat in a beautiful, large white chapel at a round table, directly in front of an altar. The eldest priest informed his subordinates that 2 weeks had passed since Archpriest Bolek had set out for the village of the Manticore Kingdom. They had had no contact with the troops since then, and he knew something must be wrong if there had been no contact for so long. The other priests at the table whispered and speculated about what might have happened. One of them openly said that due to the worries he could hardly rest, let alone sleep, and he hoped nothing terrible had happened to his friend. The elder priest said that according to the last message he received, a new magical tower had appeared in the territory he wanted to scout, and it seemed that the tower master had taken the Holy One into custody. The remaining priests at the table were suddenly astonished and desperately repeated their leader's words. He confirmed his statement but had to admit they didn't know how accurate the information was. Nevertheless, those were the last words he had received. One of the priests said that regardless of the circumstances, the fact remained that people from the Holy Kingdom were currently missing. He came up with the idea of sending a search party and asked what the other priests thought. Subsequently, a heart priest stood up and asked his master for permission to speak. The elder chief priest simply nodded, indicating to the younger one that he had the right to speak. The younger priest explained to the gathered priests that the current situation was not an easy matter. He emphasized once again that if a saint were to appear after hundreds of years, it must be the plan of a great deity they had heard and directly led them to the saint. Since this was a fact, they should put all efforts into carrying out the divine will. Therefore, he considered his colleague's proposal to send a search party inappropriate. The other priests at the table were taken aback, surprised that one of their own was taking the lead. The priest continued and suggested sending one of the holy knights with the silver cross. Even his master was astonished and wore an incredulous expression. He asked if he meant Duke Dyard. Duke Dyard and the Knights of the Silver Cross constituted about 30% of the royal army of the Holy Kingdom and possessed immense strength. Additionally, Daired was one of the grandmasters on the continent, capable of defeating dozens of sword masters in a single battle. He was the pride of the kingdom and its most formidable weapon. After the elder chief priest regained his composure, he inquired about the others' thoughts on the idea of sending Duke Daired. A few priests immediately agreed, wanting to set an example. They intended to demonstrate the strength of their kingdom and show that it was not worthwhile to fight against them. Once the senior high priest received agreement from the others, he slammed both hands on the table and gave the command to gather Duke Daired and the Knights of the Silver Cross and set them in motion. The greed to soon have the saint in their hands filled his face, and the order to unleash the Holy Kingdom's military force heightened his emotions and anticipation even more. However, not satisfied with this, he also announced that various heart priests should accompany Duke to support him. This statement once again shocked some of the priests at the table who did not understand why the entire military force would be sent at once. The elder priest explained that the saint, now in his custody, possessed great power, and they would have to directly shatter this immense power this time to save the saint. The priests at the table were just as enthusiastic as their master and understood the intention. To make it clear to everyone once again, the elder priest reiterated that they must demonstrate the strength of the Holy Kingdom in this attack. He raised his hand up to the sky and declared that whoever withdrew sealed their own doom. In response, all the other priests at the table bowed, placed their hands on their chests, and began to pray. While the priests of the Holy Kingdom contemplated their next steps, El spent his time seeking out his good friend Daible. El told Daible the whole story, leaving him quite astonished and disbelieving of what he had just heard. Self-satisfied, El smiled and was surprised that Daible was surprised. Daible couldn't believe that El had the saint in his custody and was also holding the priests of the Holy Kingdom hostage. He asked what El planned to do next. But El just smiled. Daible couldn't fathom the whole situation and slapped himself in the face. He asked El what he was planning and what the whole thing meant. And why he would make the Holy Kingdom an enemy when one usually tries to avoid any conflict with them. El set down his teacup and told Daible that unfortunately, this situation was necessary, and he wouldn't allow his beloved sister to be taken away by the Holy Kingdom. With anger in his eyes and determination, he told El that he wouldn't just sit idly by if someone tried to take something important away from him, in this case, the Holy Kingdom. Daible wanted to know again what El's exact plans were. El knew that the Holy Kingdom would now reorganize its military force and subsequently send another troop to attack him. Folding his hands together, El explained to Daible that if it came to that, he would try to negotiate with them and had no intention of relying solely on violence. Daible then asked El if he had an alternative plan. El made it clear, however, that he still had hostages in his control, and this would be a good reason for the other side to comply with his demands, rendering the need for another plan unnecessary. Daible sighed and explained to El that it didn't seem like he was involved in this plan and, frankly, he didn't want to be. Even though Daible didn't want to be directly involved, he told El that he would be willing to do something behind the scenes if asked. El explained to Daible that this was precisely why he had come and wanted to ask him for a favor. He said that now, with hostages in their possession, they needed to provide for more people, and he wanted Daible to organize more food. Additionally, El told Daible that he should slowly start cutting off the supply of manticore blood. Shocked by this request, Daible asked why he should stop the supply of manticore blood. El just smiled and explained that he had his reasons, upon which Daible understood and intended to follow the instructions given to him. Meanwhile, in the Holy Kingdom, preparations were progressing quite swiftly. The Silver Cross Knights were always ready for battle, so the preparations only took 3 days, plus an additional 2 days for the Duke to prepare for this war. The Duke had long dark brown hair and, like the other knights, wore armor. The elder priest thanked him once again for the prompt appearance and explained that the saint was entrusted to him, to which the Duke assured him that he would do his best to carry out this mission successfully. The elder priest also mentioned that the mission the Duke and the knights were to carry out was of crucial importance. However, he also stated that the task of the three high priests was equally important and not easy to accomplish. He hoped that everyone would return safely without suffering significant harm. The three priests accompanying the Duke and the knights to support them understood the command, thanked their leader, and assured him that he could trust them, and they would successfully complete the mission of rescuing their comrades and bringing back the saint. When the tasks were clearly assigned by the high priest, Duke Dyard stepped forward and cast his teleportation spell. Behind him, a magical circle appeared, and the air around him and his knights began to circulate and glow strongly. The entire square became brighter and windier. Duke Dyard and his knights' destination was the Methane Plain, located between the Manticore Valley and the mountainous region of Count Rubius. More precisely, it was the original part of Count Rubius's territory, which eventually became known as the Abandoned Plain due to the manticores streaming from the valley. Duke Dyard made it clear to his Silver Cross Knights that their missing comrades were fine until they entered the Manticore Gorge. Therefore, he didn't want to waste any time and planned to proceed directly to the Manticore Gorge without pause. The captain of the knights confirmed the orders, and together with Duke Dyard, they all raised their fists to the sky and shouted for their deity. With determination, they marched towards the Manticore Gorge. Upon reaching the entrance of the Manticore Gorge, a misty atmosphere prevailed. Duke Dyard recognized that this fog and the nature of the surroundings acted like a natural fortress, preventing them from attacking. The captain of the knights suggested sending some paladins into the village first to explore and gather intelligence. Duke Dyard liked the idea and agreed. The captain of the knights immediately turned around to send some of his men, while he himself would wait here. 6 master-level paladins and 15 regular paladins were sent for reconnaissance, but no matter how much time passed, none of them returned. In disbelief, the captain wondered what was happening and why his men didn't come back. Duke Dyard realized that the fog surrounding them possessed an unusual power. To find out what was going on, he decided to go in himself and investigate. Just as he was about to set off, the captain followed him like a small dog, warning that it could be dangerous even for a grandmaster. Duke Dyard simply turned to the remaining knights and commanded them to follow him very carefully and step by step. He then asked if they all understood. The knights confirmed with a, "Yes, sir," and followed him. The further Duke Dyard went into the mist with his troop, the harder it became, even for him, to see his hand in front of his face. He moved like a blind man, step by step forward, hands in front of his body to make sure he wouldn't suddenly run into a rock. Suddenly, Duke Dyard was startled and turned around. He realized he had lost his comrades and loudly called out where his knights had gone. He drew his weapon, shaped like a hammer, from his back and wanted to dispel the fog first while calling the name of his deity. With full force, Duke Dyard slammed the hammer on the ground in front of him, creating a very large shockwave that surrounded him and displaced the mist. As the fog gradually cleared, El's golden magical tower and the scattered city appeared. Duke Dyard was completely surprised by what he saw and didn't want to believe it at first. He looked at the city in front of him and couldn't believe that something like this would exist in the Manticore Gorge. From the background, there was a faint cursing, and someone said that it had to come to this and there was no other choice. Duke Dyard heard this and turned around instantly. He saw his men wandering around confused like zombies. Shocked and unbelieving, he looked at his knights and wondered what on earth was happening. The voice that had just cursed regretfully explained that he couldn't get rid of the fog so quickly and that it would have been nicer if he had wasted some time with them. Duke Dyard then turned around again to identify the owner of this voice. He saw El standing there, already waiting for him. El smiled and explained that he seemed to have missed the opportunity to capture the Silver Cross Knights and the 3 high priests, and that Duke Dyard appeared to be one of the grandmasters. Duke Dyard didn't know what was happening and looked somewhat confused, holding his weapon in one hand. El bowed politely, greeted him, introduced himself, and explained that he was the new powmaster of the Golden Tower. Angrily, Duke Dyard asked El if he had created this mist, which he confirmed with a smile. El explained that Duke Dyard and his knights probably hadn't come out of goodwill, and there was nothing wrong with wanting to defend oneself. Duke Dyard became somewhat angry, muttering and grinding his teeth. However, El didn't let it go unnoticed and provoked him by asking how long he would keep staring at him so angrily. Duke Dyard admitted that their intention was not solely one of goodwill. He wanted to be honest and directly asked El if he was the one holding the sanctity captive. El just smiled and explained that it seemed that way. Duke Dyard then got angry and shouted at El, veins becoming visible on his forehead. El explained that the person bearing the name of Sanctity was a member of his family, and he couldn't care less about the title of Sanctity. Duke Dyard said he could understand, but tried to explain to El that a family member was still their sanctity, and ordinary people couldn't rebel against the will of God. El raised his voice, asking Duke Dyard what exactly the will of God was and what mere mortals were. However, Duke Dyard ignored El's question, stating that one didn't have to submit to the fate of the gods in the end, one had to ripen it with some violence. He raised his hammer into the air, infusing it with some of his aura, turning the hammer a golden color. Seeing this, El had to admit that this little spectacle was quite impressive. However, he also had a golden secret weapon, so he summoned his golden night golem, which came running at high speed and charged directly at Duke Dyard to tackle him head-on. Thanks to the force of the golem, Duke Dyard was pushed backward but managed to fend off the attack and avoid direct damage. El then raised a small orb to the sky and invoked his spell, Pleiades. Then a large golden arrow appeared above El, ready to fly directly towards Duke Dyard and pierce him. The arrow that El conjured immediately shot towards Duke Dyard. However, Duke Dyard saw the attack coming, managed to swing his own golden hammer at the last moment, deflecting El's arrow by knocking it down in the nick of time, and it fell at his feet on the ground. Even though Duke Dyard had successfully defended against El's attack, he had to acknowledge that there was a tremendous power behind the assault. However, El just stood there and arrogantly stated that he only intended to scare Duke Dyard a bit and hadn't expected him to be so frightened by a simple attack. Duke Dyard turned to his knights and asked them if they were just going to stand there or if they intended to join the fight. The knights, grouped in a light blue formation, explained that they couldn't move anymore, as there seemed to be a barrier around them. This surprised Duke Dyard, who had not noticed it before, and made him angrier. However, El explained to him that this barrier was to prevent the small fry from getting accidentally hurt. Additionally, El pointed to a rock ledge and told Duke Dyard that the 50 knights he had sent earlier had also received not a single scratch. Furious, Duke Dyard turned to El and complained about the audacity of this situation. El then said that he sounded like an old man. When Duke Dyard heard El calling him an old man, he became even angrier, his eyes reddened, and the vein on his forehead became more visible. Grumbling with the knights behind him, he just stared at El, who explained that, as Duke Dyard could currently see, there was no one there to help him. El also mentioned that the panic Duke Dyard was experiencing was visibly apparent and that this panic would make him sad. He explained that this was the price the reactions to the actions of the Holy Kingdom brought with them. Duke Dyard repeated the question about what he meant by the price and said that El would be the one to pay it soon. However, when El said, "Would it really come to that?" Duke Dyard became even angrier. El smiled, raised his index finger to his mouth, and asked what he would think of a little bet. Duke Dyard asked what El intended with a bet, to which he explained that the golem that had attacked him, his masterpiece, the Golden Knight, was on the same level as a grandmaster in terms of abilities. El laid out the terms of the bet, stating that in the case of his victory, his people would be released, while in the case of the golem's victory, Duke Dyard himself would become one of his prisoners. Duke Dyard burst into laughter, loudly declaring it to be ridiculous. Filled with confidence and arrogance, he found the idea amusing that he could become a prisoner himself, asking if he was allowed to shatter the golem El was so proud of into 1,000 pieces. El just smiled and said that before he thought about that, Duke Dyard should worry about his own life first. Duke Dyard, unwilling to waste any time, immediately launched an attack. He raised his golden hammer once again, swirling it in the air, releasing such tremendous energy that even El had to shield his face with his hand. Duke Dyard could no longer restrain his bloodlust and eagerness for battle, his face displaying a visible grin of joy and the desire for revenge. El raised his hand forward and commanded Tana to destroy the target. Tana identified the target and confirmed the destruction order. Without wasting time, she drew her sword and took the fight seriously. Tana struck directly forward with her sword, interrupting Duke Dyard's swirling. The two intense attacks collided, kicking up a lot of dust. Tana managed to dodge the subsequent attacks. But her own attacks were also repeatedly blocked. Duke Dyard wanted to unleash another massive attack, and once again, the Duke's hammer and Tana's sword clashed. The knights in El's blue barriers couldn't believe what they were seeing. They were utterly astonished that their leader was fighting someone equally strong. Even Duke Dyard had to admit that El's golem was extremely impressive. And that the power of the golem was indeed comparable to that of a grandmaster. However, this only made Duke Dyard angrier, and his grip on his weapon tightened. He hurled his golden hammer upward again, letting out a loud scream, causing his golden hammer to shine brightly. Even the soldiers wondered what was suddenly happening. The hammer began to shed its outermost golden layer. El, also blinded by the light, wondered what was happening. As the golden layer of the hammer fell off, a slightly darker, black hammer emerged. This was a sacred relic named the Divine Hammer that destroys evil. It was one of the 3 sacred relics, housing immense authority incapable of annihilating anything not divine. El was speechless, and for the first time, he was genuinely amazed by an unforeseen turn of events. Duke Dyard was surprised that El had immediately recognized his weapon and praised him for having sharp eyes. He also explained that he didn't want to use this weapon unless it was absolutely necessary. El recognized the critical situation he was in and had to quickly come up with a new plan. Even the Knights of the Silver Cross had never seen this weapon, or rather, this sacred relic of the divine, and were amazed by the tremendous power it emanated. On the continent, there are 3 types of sacred relics, the 3 great sacred relics, the 5 great sacred swords, and the 5 great demons, considered the strongest forces on the continent. This includes the Divine Hammer that destroys evil, which harbors immense authority to eradicate anything non-divine. El realized that this hammer was created to neutralize an aura blade and make the magic of a 7th-class magician disappear without a trace. Duke Dyard whirled his hammer in the air again and told El that the fact he had compelled him to use this weapon was an acknowledgement of his strength. However, Duke Dyard also said, as he approached El and his golem, that this was now the end. He attacked Tana with his hammer, but she managed to evade at the last moment, avoiding a direct hit. Yet, one could distinctly feel that, although a direct hit hadn't occurred, the aura of the hammer had changed, and the hammer had unleashed its true power. Due to Duke Dyard's attack, a small crater had now formed on the battlefield, and El had to once again acknowledge the incredible strength of Duke Dyard and the hammer. However, Duke Dyard wasn't giving El's golem time to rest, he yelled and went straight into the next attack. As a precautionary measure, Tana instinctively withdrew upon hearing Duke Dyard shout. He was visibly pleased that the golem showed such fear and retreated with a simple shout. Duke Dyard found it admirable to believe that Tana could still contend with him in a fight and asked El what he would do now since this was the last chance he had. Once again, Duke Dyard prepared for an attack, leaped into the air, and was about to deliver a final blow to Tana. El commanded Tana to dodge, and she did, narrowly escaping the devastating attack. Duke Dyard's attack dislodged many smaller rocks in the vicinity, sending them flying. Amidst the chaos and the golem still in a defensive stance, El issued the command to create more distance. Tana transitioned into long-range mode, and El confirmed the command. Green energy salvos from Tana now targeted Duke Dyard, who easily blocked them. Duke Dyard then prepared to counterattack with his hammer, swung it powerfully once, and threw it towards El. Seeing this, El had to admit that he had once again underestimated Duke Dyard, closed his eyes, and reluctantly stated that, since Duke Dyard had played dirty, he would do the same. El extended his hand forward, causing Tana to vanish. Duke Dyard turned around, diverting his attention from El, and asked where the golden golem had gone. However, Tana reappeared behind Duke Dyard, who turned once again. He wondered if it was magic. El explained that this was his trump card, never expecting Duke Dyard to bring out a divine war hammer. This infuriated Duke Dyard again, and he wanted to give it his all and land a direct hit this time. However, El suggested they should end this fight here, as it was pointless to continue. El contemplated that it wouldn't be easy to overpower Duke, considering he possessed a holy relic and seemed capable of easily keeping up with and even overwhelming Tana, despite her being in the last mode. Duke Dyard remarked to El that he remained arrogant to the end. In response, El displayed goodwill, stating that he would release Duke Dyard's people and ensure they were without major injuries. He also released the second barrier holding the first 50 people he had captured. Duke Dyard immediately commanded the leader of the Silver Cross Knights to take care of everything, which the leader promptly executed. Subsequently, Duke Dyard asked El if he had another priest named Bolek, as the knights were out in the world. However, El, who had already shown goodwill with the release, this time stated that he wouldn't reveal this fact. Duke Dyard then expressed his frustration, stating that he would curse the sly grin on El's face. El casually asked why Duke Dyard would get so angry over a simple smile, to which Duke Dyard shouted at El's face that while he might go home empty-handed this time, he would make sure to take the saint with him next time. As Duke Dyard turned away, El remarked that it wouldn't be an easy task. While Duke Dyard and the Silver Cross Knights slowly walked away, El watched them and concluded that he needed a weapon that could match the saint. At the headquarters of the Silver Cross Knights, they took a short break, and everyone appeared visibly exhausted. The leader of the knights recognized that his subordinates were physically sound but lacked strength, likely suffering from internal injuries. Duke Dyard acknowledged that he was dealing with a formidable opponent. Meanwhile, the commander of the knights explained that it would take at least a month to heal the internal injuries and return to their original strength. This news infuriated Duke Dyard. He gnashed his teeth once again, and personally, I'm now afraid they might explode in his head. Meanwhile, in the desert realm of Dazek, one of the 5 great realms, at the temple of the Reynard goddess sect, the largest holy site, a significant incident occurred. Recently, the Reynard temple received a massive supply of manticore blood via the Jebel trading post. The priests processed this blood into potions, yielding tremendous profits. Archbishop Bolek, who ordered this, gained massive support within the sect. But now, as the regular supply of manticore blood suddenly became scarce, Archbishop Bolek found himself in an unexpected dilemma. When someone informed the archbishop that the quantity of manticore blood was diminishing, he naturally panicked. He wanted to know why the blood supply was reaching its limits and urgently wanted to talk to Dibel about it. When he arrived at Dibel's shop, the two sat at a table and drank tea. However, the archbishop didn't want to waste time and directly wanted to learn the reasons behind the drastic reduction in manticore blood supply. Dibel remained calm, telling the archbishop that there was no need to panic and that he should have some of his tea to calm down. Smiling, Dibel mentioned that the tea was really excellent. The archbishop attempted to compose himself and took a sip of the tea. While blowing on it as it was still very hot, he asked again if Dibel could tell him the reason for the delivery failures. Dibel explained that the truth was that there had been a few complications. Curious, the archbishop inquired about the complications and what might have caused them. Dibel adjusted his glasses, which hung on a golden chain around his neck, and said that it was a secret that couldn't be easily disclosed. The archbishop then asked Dibel if they had secrets from each other, emphasizing that they were in this together. Dibel said that if the archbishop could promise to keep the secret, he would tell him. As the archbishop was naturally cornered, he stated that, of course, he could keep this secret and wanted to hear Dibel's secret. Dibel said that the Reynard temple would never receive manticore blood again. However, the archbishop deemed this impossible and pleaded with Dibel to lie to him. Dibel assured him that he wouldn't lie and explained the situation. He clarified that the blood he had came from the Manticore Gorge, owned by a 7th-class mage who had settled there. Dibel further explained that he captured the manticores there and extracted their blood. The archbishop listened intently. Dibel elaborated that he had a contract with the Tower Master, who was responsible for the blood supply across the entire continent. Additionally, Dibel informed the archbishop that this Tower Master had recently gotten involved in some problems. Naturally, the archbishop wanted to know what problems the Tower Master had encountered. Leaning over to the archbishop, Dibel whispered in his ear that the Tower Master, by settling there, had accepted the protection of the Holy Virgin. When the archbishop learned about the protection the Tower Master had taken, he was shocked. Even with the explanation that this conflict between the Tower Master and the Holy Kingdom could escalate further, the archbishop had to swallow hard and didn't know what to do. Dibel asked if this event wasn't so unusual that it was almost unbelievable. The archbishop also found it incredible and couldn't believe it. Dibel explained that it was normal to be shocked and that he himself was quite shocked after learning everything. The will of the Holy Kingdom is akin to the will of the goddess Gaia, and when the Holy Kingdom moves, many other nations that believe in the goddess Gaia would follow. This immense power surpasses even that of the other empires. Therefore, the archbishop was understandably very tense. Once the archbishop had somewhat composed himself, he turned his gaze back to Dibel and asked what would happen with the blood supply, emphasizing that this was a serious problem. However, Dibel just smiled and said that he was well aware that it was a problem. Curiously, the archbishop asked if Dibel had found another solution. Dibel explained that there was no reason to worry and mentioned that the Tower Master was more powerful than the archbishop might think. The archbishop, taking a sip and wincing at the once too hot tea, rubbed his temples, attempting to calm and relax himself. Dibel expressed his confusion about why the archbishop had such great fear of the Holy Kingdom and questioned whether the church of his deity was not an influential force as well. The archbishop, stating he didn't fully understand due to lacking details, emphasized that the Holy Kingdom was much more potent than his church. Dibel clapped his hands and proposed the idea of the archbishop's church joining forces with them. The archbishop's gaze shifted towards Dibel, who then questioned if the Ainhart church was just one among many. Raising his hand, Dibel asked if there weren't 5 major churches in the vast kingdom. The archbishop acknowledged this, and in that moment, he contemplated whether uniting the churches could be a possibility to oppose the Holy Kingdom. Dibel realized that his plan to plant the idea of uniting the churches had succeeded. The archbishop stated he understood and that he would immediately report to the Grand Chancellor to initiate the plan. Dibel added that if everything went smoothly, he would supply Ainhart with 150,000 soldiers for the next 3 months. Upon hearing this, the archbishop beamed and expressed his gratitude to Dibel. Meanwhile, in the Holy Kingdom of Gaia, the oldest priest slammed his hand on the table once again. He inquired about what in the world had happened. They were holding a conference with other priests, all seated around a large round table, except for the 3 priests accompanying Duke Dyard. Some priests wondered how this could happen, while others questioned what they could do now. The oldest priest tossed a few papers into the air, asking if they had not all carefully read the message. He couldn't comprehend the fuss over a holy virgin and why they were receiving a warning. He also wondered, along with everyone else at the table, since when they had become so arrogant towards him. Another priest at the table even mentioned that they had cautiously asked the owner of the blue magical tower for support, but he never expected to receive such a response. Another priest, already on the verge of despair, stated that everything was very confusing and wondered why even the dispatched archbishops and paladins remained silent. The oldest priest asked one of the other archbishops, who was also present during the announcement of the prophecy, if he understood why the 5 great empires were giving such a response. However, he was equally clueless and mentioned that the Holy Virgin could have a positive effect on the 5 great empires. Another priest agreed with this and suggested that they should also consider the money they could earn with the Holy Virgin and pilgrimages. The priest who was present at the prophecy agreed with his colleague, stating that the kingdom's decision was incomprehensible, no matter how one looked at it. The oldest priest asked what exactly he meant and threw the idea into the room that someone might be pressuring them into this decision. The younger priest explained that this was precisely what he thought, that the 5 churches in the 5 great empires might be planning something. After the thoughts were voiced, silence fell. After a few seconds, the oldest priest could not believe that the idea he heard was so plausible, and he asked the others at the table why the 5 churches would do such a thing. The younger priest said he wasn't sure himself, but one thing was quite clear. The oldest priest wanted to know what that thing was. The younger priest explained that it seemed the 5 churches were afraid that if they handed over the Holy Virgin, the influence of their church would become even stronger. When the young priest announced his idea, the others couldn't believe it and made a big uproar. The young priest continued, saying that the 5 churches were probably afraid that if they handed over the Holy Virgin, the power of the goddess Gaia would increase, and therefore, they were trying to exploit this event to their advantage. As this idea seemed so logical, even the oldest priest believed, after the explanation of the younger priest, that he had to sit down and digest everything. However, he knew that this idea was not a confirmed action. The oldest priest knew that the 5 churches owed obedience to the words of the Holy Kingdom. Yet, he also knew that they were secretly distrustful and resistant to these words. A priest at the table suggested that it might be just as the younger priest had explained earlier. He also said that it would be understandable for the 5 churches to fear that their influence might disappear due to the appearance of the Holy Virgin. Furthermore, he found it very disconcerting that the 5 great kingdoms hesitated after the Holy Virgin was chosen. The oldest priest also found this fact of hesitation very problematic, and his understanding was no different from his comrades'. He then asked the group whether it was actually possible to communicate with Duke Dyard again. At the headquarters of the Silver Cross Knights, Duke Dyard and a few high archpriests, as well as the commander of the knights, were discussing their situation. Duke Dyard looked down at the soldiers still lying on the ground, struggling with their internal injuries. One of the archpriests recognized that the soldiers were in an extremely dangerous situation. Duke Dyard asked the 3rd commander if he had by now informed the Holy Kingdom about their situation. The response was that sending someone was too dangerous, so he had sent a carrier pigeon. This worried Duke Dyard as he had not received a response yet. Suddenly, a bird appeared out of nowhere and landed in the hands of the commander. He was relieved to finally have received a response from the Holy Kingdom. Duke Dyard immediately took the note and was astonished after reading it.